Commander Jake Matthews stepped off the diplomatic transport onto the crystal platform of the Zephyrian capital ship. The artificial gravity felt lighter than Earth standard, making each step feel like a small bounce. Around him, towering aliens with pale blue skin and elongated limbs moved with graceful precision. Their ships were works of art, all flowing curves and bioluminescent panels that pulsed with soft light. Jake adjusted his simple black military uniform and checked the translation device clipped to his collar. 3 months ago, humanity had made first contact with the Zephyrian Empire, a vast civilization that controlled dozens of star systems. The Zephyrians had technology that made human ships look like wooden boats compared to nuclear submarines. The massive doors to the throne chamber slid open without a sound. Inside, hundreds of Zephyrian nobles stood in perfect rows, their silver robes shimmering under the ambient lighting. At the far end of the chamber sat Emperor Vexhaller on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal. The emperor was ancient even by Zephyrian standards, his skin having taken on a deep purple hue that spoke of centuries of wisdom and power, but Jake's attention was drawn to the figure standing beside the throne. Princess Larethis was considered the most brilliant mind of her generation. Her silver hair fell in waves to her shoulders, and her eyes held an intelligence that seemed to pierce right through anyone she looked at. She wore robes that shifted color like oil on water, and a crown of crystalline spikes that caught the light in mesmerizing patterns. So Princess Larethis said, her voice carrying easily across the vast chamber despite its soft tone. "This is the human representative." She stepped down from the platform, circling Jake like a predator studying its prey. "I expected something more impressive. Your species claims to have conquered your homeworld, yet you look so ordinary." Jake kept his face neutral, though he could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon him. The translation device was working perfectly, but he could hear the condescension in the princess's natural voice even without understanding the words. "Your Majesty," Jake said, bowing slightly to the Emperor, "I bring greetings from Earth and hope for peaceful relations between our peoples." Princess Larethis laughed, a sound like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. "How charming. He speaks as if his primitive world has something to offer us." She gestured toward the viewing screens that showed images of human cities. "Your largest structures would be lost in the shadows of our smallest orbital platforms. Your fastest ships would take decades to travel distances we cover in days." The assembled nobles murmured among themselves, some laughing openly at the humans' expense. Jake had expected this. The briefing materials had warned him that Zephyrian culture valued intellectual and technological superiority above all else. To them, humans were barely above the level of clever animals. "Your species has potential," the princess continued, now standing directly in front of Jake. "Perhaps in a few thousand years, you might develop something approaching real civilization. Until then, you should be grateful that we acknowledge your existence at all." Emperor Vexhaller raised a hand for silence. "My daughter speaks harshly, human, but her words contain truth. We have observed your species for some time. You show promise in certain areas, but you lack the refinement and advancement of the elder races. However," the Emperor continued, "the Council of Worlds has decreed that all sentient species shall have the opportunity to prove their worth. This is an ancient tradition, one that has served our empire well for millennia." Princess Larethis' eyes lit up with what Jake recognized as dangerous amusement. "Father, might I suggest the trial of minds? It has been so long since we've had entertainment worthy of the court." The Emperor considered this, stroking his elongated chin. "The trial of minds, Yes, that would be appropriate. Human, do you know what this entails?" Jake shook his head. "I do not, Your Majesty." "It is a contest of intellect, strategy, and adaptability," Princess Larethis explained, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "A series of challenges designed to test the full range of mental capabilities. I myself have never been defeated in such a trial." She began pacing again, her excitement growing. "The trial consists of 3 phases. First, a battle of pure logic and mathematical reasoning. Second, a strategic simulation where participants must outmaneuver their opponent in an ever-changing tactical scenario. Finally, an innovation challenge where contestants must solve a problem using limited resources and their own creativity. Jake listened carefully, already understanding that this was far more than a simple test. The way the princess spoke about it, the gleam in her eye, suggested that his failure would be used to demonstrate human inferiority to the entire Zephyrian court. I accept the challenge. Your Majesty, Jake said simply. Princess Larathis clapped her hands together in delight. Wonderful. And to make this more interesting, she paused dramatically, ensuring she had the attention of every being in the chamber. I propose stakes worthy of such an occasion. The Emperor leaned forward, intrigued. What do you have in mind, my daughter? The princess's smile was predatory. If the human somehow manages to defeat me, which of course is impossible, I will take him as my husband and bind our worlds in marriage alliance. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. Such a union would make humanity equal partners in the Zephyrian Empire overnight. And if I lose? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. When you lose, the princess corrected, emphasizing the word when, humanity will formally acknowledge Zephyrian superiority and accept status as a protected but subordinate species. Your world will provide raw materials and basic labor to the Empire, and your brightest minds will be educated in our ways. Jake felt his stomach tighten. She was offering humanity either partnership or slavery, dressed up in diplomatic language. But she was so confident in her superiority that she didn't even consider the possibility of losing. Those are significant stakes, Emperor Vexhaller observed. Are you certain, my daughter? Princess Larathis laughed again, louder this time. Father, I have studied human cognitive capabilities. Their brains are smaller, their thought processes more linear, their educational systems primitive. This human might be their best representative, but he is competing against 15 centuries of Zephyrian intellectual evolution. She turned to face the court. I have defeated the greatest minds of 17 different species. I have solved mathematical proofs that computers could not crack. I have commanded fleets and simulations so complex that even our AI systems struggled to keep up. Her voice rose with growing confidence. What could this human possibly do that would surprise me? Jake remained silent, but inside his mind was racing. The princess was clearly brilliant, but she had just made a critical error. She had assumed that human thinking was simply a less advanced version of Zephyrian thinking. She didn't understand that humans might approach problems in completely different ways. Very well, the Emperor declared. The trial will commence tomorrow. Princess Larathis, you will represent the Zephyrian Empire. Commander Matthews, you will represent humanity. The entire court will serve as witnesses. As the formal ceremony concluded, Jake was escorted to luxurious quarters to prepare for the trial. The room was beautiful, with walls that seemed to be made of living crystal and furnishings that adjusted themselves to his preferences. But he barely noticed the comfort. Instead, he spent the evening reviewing everything he knew about Zephyrian culture and psychology. They prized logical thinking, technological advancement, and elegant solutions. Their entire civilization was built on the assumption that intelligence could be measured, quantified, and improved through systematic study, but humans had something that Jake suspected the Zephyrians had lost in their pursuit of pure logic, unpredictability. Human thinking was messy, chaotic, and often inefficient. But it was also creative in ways that purely logical minds sometimes couldn't grasp. As he lay down to sleep in the alien bed, Jake smiled grimly. Princess Larathis thought she was about to demonstrate human inferiority to the galaxy. Instead, she was about to get a very unpleasant surprise. The stakes she had set were astronomical, but they cut both ways. If Jake could somehow win, humanity would leap from primitive newcomers to equal partners overnight. The next morning would determine the future of his entire species. No pressure at all. The trial arena was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The chamber had transformed overnight into a space that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Holographic displays floated in midair, showing complex mathematical equations, star charts, and what looked like simulated battlefield scenarios. The floor itself was a massive interactive surface that could project three-dimensional models at will. Princess Lyrathis entered the arena wearing ceremonial robes of deep blue and silver, her crystalline crown catching the light from the floating displays. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Behind her walked her advisors, each one a renowned scholar in their own right. Jake wore his simple military uniform, carrying only a standard tablet computer and a worn notebook that had belonged to his grandfather. The contrast between the two contestants was stark, and the hundreds of assembled nobles whispered among themselves about the humans' apparent lack of preparation. "Citizens of the Empire," Emperor Vexhaller's voice boomed across the arena. "Today we witness a trial that will determine the relationship between our civilizations for generations to come. The first phase begins now." A massive holographic display materialized between Jake and the princess. Complex equations in Zephyrian mathematical notation filled the air, shifting and rearranging themselves in patterns that seemed to pulse with their own logic. "The Logic Gate Challenge," Princess Lyrathis announced with obvious pleasure. "We must solve a series of interconnected mathematical proofs, each one building upon the last. The goal is to find the underlying pattern that connects all solutions." Jake studied the floating equations. The mathematics was advanced, using symbols and concepts he had never seen before. But as he watched, he began to notice something interesting. The Zephyrian approach seemed to rely on building elaborate logical structures, like constructing a cathedral of pure reason. While the princess began working methodically through the first proof, Jake took a different approach. He pulled out his grandfather's notebook and started sketching. Not equations, but shapes. Circles and triangles and irregular polygons that seemed to have nothing to do with mathematics. "What is the human doing?" whispered one of the noble observers. Princess Lyrathis glanced over at Jake's sketching with amusement. "Perhaps he is drawing pictures because he cannot understand the equations," she said loudly enough for the court to hear. Laughter rippled through the assembled crowd, but Jake continued drawing, his hand moving rapidly across the paper. He was using a technique he had learned in engineering school, something called pattern visualization. Instead of trying to solve the equations directly, he was looking for the visual patterns hidden within the mathematical relationships. After 20 minutes, Princess Lyrathis had completed 3 of the 7 proofs. Her work was flawless, each logical step building perfectly upon the last. The crowd murmured appreciatively as her solutions appeared on the display screens. Jake was still drawing. "Human," the princess called out, "are you perhaps experiencing difficulty with our elementary mathematics?" Jake looked up from his notebook and smiled. "Actually, I think I see the pattern now." He walked to the interactive display and began inputting data, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of working through the proofs sequentially, Jake started connecting seemingly random elements from different equations. His approach looked chaotic, almost random. Several of the observing scholars shook their heads in confusion. Then something extraordinary happened. As Jake's seemingly random connections reached a critical mass, the entire mathematical structure suddenly collapsed into a single, elegant solution. All 7 proofs resolved simultaneously, their answers appearing as a simple geometric pattern that had been hidden beneath layers of complexity. The arena fell silent. "Impossible," whispered one of the princess's advisors. "That approach should not work. The mathematical foundations are completely different." Princess Lyrathis stared at the display, her confidence shaken for the first time. How did you see that pattern?" "Our greatest mathematicians have spent centuries developing the logical frameworks for those proofs." "Sometimes," Jake said quietly, "the shortest distance between 2 points isn't a straight line." Emperor Vexhaller leaned forward with interest. "Explain your method, human." "In human mathematics, we have something called intuitive leaps," Jake explained. "Instead of building logical structures step by step, we look for patterns that our subconscious minds can recognize before our rational minds understand them. It's messy, but sometimes faster." The second phase began immediately. The arena floor transformed into a three-dimensional tactical simulation. Two fleets faced each other in a complex star system filled with asteroids, gas clouds, and gravitational anomalies. Strategic warfare simulation, Princess Lerathis announced, her composure returning. We command equal fleets in a scenario that changes constantly. Victory goes to the commander who adapts most effectively to unexpected developments. This was more familiar territory for Jake. As a military officer, he had run countless battle simulations. But these Zephyrian ships moved in ways that defied human tactical doctrine, and the environmental hazards were unlike anything from Earth's experience. Princess Lerathis began deploying her forces with mathematical precision. Her formations were perfect geometries, her ship movements calculated to optimal efficiency. She positioned her fleet to control the high-energy zones while using the asteroids as natural fortifications. Jake watched her deployment and nodded appreciatively. It was textbook perfect, exactly what any military academy would teach. It was also completely predictable. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, Jake scattered his ships seemingly at random throughout the star system. His formations looked chaotic, with vessels positioned in ways that violated every principle of fleet command that the Zephyrians understood. What kind of strategy is this? Princess Lerathis muttered. Studying Jake's positions with growing confusion, the first engagement began when environmental hazards started appearing. Solar flares, gravitational shifts, and asteroid movements that forced both commanders to adapt their strategies in real time. Princess Lerathis' perfect formations began to falter. When a solar flare disrupted her communication grid, her precisely coordinated fleet lost cohesion. When gravitational anomalies shifted the asteroid field, her carefully planned positions became tactical liabilities, but Jake's scattered fleet seemed to thrive in the chaos. Individual ship captains, operating with minimal coordination, adapted rapidly to each new threat. When communication was disrupted, they fought independently. When the battlefield changed, they were already positioned to take advantage of new opportunities. Impossible, the princess breathed as her carefully planned assault fell apart. Fleet actions require central coordination. How can his ships function without proper command structure? Jake's forces began converging on her position from unexpected angles. His ships moved like a swarm rather than a fleet, each vessel responding to local conditions while contributing to an overall strategy that seemed to emerge organically from chaos. Human military doctrine emphasizes initiative at every level, Jake explained as his forces systematically dismantled her remaining formations. We call it commander's intent. Every soldier understands the overall goal and is trained to achieve it using their own judgment. Princess Lerathis' fleet was finally surrounded and overwhelmed, not through superior firepower, but through tactical unpredictability that her logical mind couldn't counter. The princess stared at the simulation results in stunned silence. She had lost 2 phases of the trial to approaches that shouldn't have worked according to everything she understood about logic and strategy. The final phase, Emperor Vexhaller announced, his voice filled with newfound interest. Innovation challenge. A pile of seemingly random materials appeared on the arena floor, metal scraps, crystalline components, energy cells, various tools, and substances that Jake didn't recognize. You must create a functional device that can accomplish a specific task, the princess explained. Though her earlier confidence had evaporated, the task will be revealed once you begin. You have 2 hours and may only use the materials provided. The challenge appeared on the display screens. Create a method to safely extract a rare mineral from the center of an unstable energy matrix without destroying either the mineral or the matrix. Princess Lerathis immediately began sorting materials and sketching designs for an elegant extraction device. Her approach was systematic, logical, and based on established engineering principles. Jake picked up a piece of scrap metal and started bending it with his hands for the next hour. The princess constructed a sophisticated device that looked like a work of art. It used harmonic resonance to gradually separate the mineral from the energy matrix. A solution that was theoretically perfect, Jake built what looked like a crude mechanical contraption using bent metal, rubber bands from his own equipment, and a handful of the provided components. When testing began, Princess Laretha's device performed exactly as designed. It successfully extracted the mineral using elegant energy manipulation techniques that drew admiring gasps from the crowd. Then Jake activated his device. It grabbed the entire energy matrix, gave it a sharp mechanic. The silence in the arena stretched for nearly a full minute. Princess Laretha stood frozen, staring at Jake's crude but effective device as if it had personally betrayed everything she believed about the universe. The assembled nobles whispered frantically among themselves, their voices creating a susurrus of shocked disbelief that echoed off the crystal walls. Emperor Vexhaller descended from his throne with measured steps, his ancient eyes fixed on the human who had just accomplished the impossible. Each footfall seemed to resonate through the chamber, marking a moment that would reshape galactic politics forever. In 1,500 years of ruling this empire, the emperor said slowly, I have witnessed many trials of minds. I have seen mathematical proofs that redefined reality, strategic simulations that predicted the movement of stars, and innovations that transformed entire civilizations. He paused directly in front of Jake. I have never seen anyone defeat my daughter. Princess Laretha finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Father, I do not understand how this is possible. Every calculation, every projection, every analysis suggested that human cognitive capabilities were insufficient for advanced problem-solving. Perhaps, the Emperor replied, our calculations were based on incomplete data. Jake stepped forward, addressing the princess directly. Your Highness, you approached each challenge the way your people have been taught for centuries. Logical, methodical, elegant. Those are admirable qualities, and in most situations they probably work perfectly. The princess nodded slowly, still trying to process her defeat. Then how did you succeed where superior logic failed? Because I didn't try to be superior, Jake explained. I tried to be effective. When you see a mathematical proof, you build a logical structure to support the solution. When I see the same proof, I look for shortcuts and patterns that might not be mathematically elegant but still reach the right answer. He gestured toward the tactical simulation display, which still showed the aftermath of their battle. Your fleet movements were perfect examples of strategic theory. But human military history taught us that perfect theory doesn't account for human factors like initiative, adaptability, and controlled chaos. Admiral Vorthak, the princess's strategic advisor, interrupted with obvious frustration. But chaos should lead to defeat. Random actions cannot overcome coordinated planning. It's not random, Jake corrected gently. It's emergent order. When you give intelligent individuals a clear objective and the freedom to achieve it, they create coordination naturally. It looks like chaos from the outside because you can't predict exactly what they'll do, but it's actually a different kind of organization. Princess Laretha walked slowly around Jake's improvised extraction device, studying it from every angle. And this contraption works because you ignored conventional engineering principles entirely. I used engineering principles, Jake said with a slight smile. Just different ones. Sometimes the most sophisticated approach to a problem is recognizing that it doesn't actually require sophistication. Emperor Vexhaller raised his hand for silence. The trial has concluded according to ancient law. The terms were agreed upon by both parties before witnesses. He turned to his daughter. Princess Laretha, you bound yourself by sacred oath to accept the consequences of defeat. The princess straightened her shoulders, and for the first time since the trial began, Jake saw something in her expression that reminded him why she was considered the most brilliant mind of her generation. She was analyzing the situation, adapting to new data, and reaching conclusions with impressive speed. I did indeed, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the arena. I swore that if Commander Matthews achieved victory, I would take him as my husband and bind our worlds in marriage alliance. She turned to face Jake directly. I will honor that oath. Your Highness, Jake said carefully, I want you to understand that I didn't enter this trial seeking marriage. I came here to establish peaceful relations between our species. If you feel that this arrangement would be contrary to your happiness or your duty to your people, perhaps we could discuss alternative terms. Princess Larathis studied him with those piercing eyes, and Jake had the distinct impression he was being subjected to an analysis, more thorough than anything the arena's computers could perform. Commander Matthews, she said slowly, do you believe that our union would be purely political? An arrangement of convenience to fulfill a rash promise made in arrogance? Jake considered his words carefully. I believe it could be much more than that if both parties were willing. Your intelligence is remarkable, even if it works differently from human thinking. And I suspect that our different approaches to problem solving could complement each other rather than competing. A genuine smile appeared on the princess's face for the first time. You see strategic value in cognitive diversity. Most fascinating. She began pacing again, but this time her movement seemed thoughtful rather than predatory. Tell me, Commander, what did you observe about Zephyrian society during your brief time here? Your people have achieved incredible things, Jake replied honestly. Your technology, your art, your social organization, they're all remarkable, but I noticed something interesting. All of your greatest achievements seem to follow similar patterns. Logical progression, elegant efficiency, mathematical precision. And you perceive this as a limitation? I perceive it as an opportunity, Jake corrected. Your society has optimized itself for certain types of thinking. But every approach has blind spots. Human thinking is messier, more chaotic, less predictable. But that means we see solutions that pure logic might miss. Princess Larathis stopped pacing and faced him squarely. You are suggesting that our union could provide both civilizations with access to different cognitive frameworks. Exactly. Imagine what we could accomplish together. Your precision and our improvisation. Your systematic approach and our intuitive leaps. Your technology enhanced by human unpredictability. Emperor Vexhaller had been listening to this exchange with growing interest. You speak of marriage not as a political arrangement, but as an intellectual partnership. Why not both? Jake asked. The best human marriages are partnerships between people who make each other stronger, smarter, and more capable than they could be alone. Princess Lyrathis' eyes lit up with what Jake was beginning to recognize as her expression when she encountered a particularly intriguing puzzle, a synergistic relationship. Two cognitive systems working in parallel to achieve results neither could accomplish independently. Plus, Jake added with a slight grin, I have to admit, I find intelligence incredibly attractive. And you're probably the smartest person I've ever met. The princess actually laughed at that, a sound of genuine amusement rather than mocking superiority. Flatterer. Though I must admit I am intrigued by the way your mind works. It operates according to principles I had not previously considered. She turned to address the assembled court. Citizens of the Empire, 3 hours ago I believed that human thinking was simply inferior Zephyrian thinking. I now understand that it is something entirely different. Commander Matthews has demonstrated that cognitive diversity represents a resource that our empire has been lacking. Emperor Vexhaller nodded approvingly. Wisdom often comes from understanding the limitations of our own perspectives. Therefore, the princess continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident, I gladly accept this marriage alliance, not as a burden imposed by defeat, but as an opportunity to explore new frontiers of intellectual cooperation. Jake felt a mixture of relief, excitement, and nervousness. Your Highness, I'm honored by your acceptance, though I should probably mention that human marriage customs might be somewhat different from Zephyrian ones. How so? Well, we generally expect our marriages to involve mutual affection, shared interests, and emotional connection, not just political or intellectual partnership. Princess Lyrathis tilted her head thoughtfully. Emotional connection. You mean the formation of pair bonds based on neurochemical responses and psychological compatibility? That's one way to describe it, Jake said with amusement. We usually just call it love. Love, the princess repeated, testing the concept. A state of emotional attachment that enhances cooperative behavior and mutual support. I find this appealing. It would provide additional motivation for successful partnership beyond mere intellectual curiosity. I think, Jake said carefully, that we should probably spend some time getting to know each other before we start planning the wedding. In human culture, couples usually have a period of courtship to determine if they're compatible. Courtship, Princess Lerathis mused. A systematic process of mutual evaluation and emotional development. Logical, I approve. She paused, then added with something that might have been shyness, "Would you be willing to teach me about human thinking patterns? I find myself curious." "About the cognitive processes that led to your victory?" "I'd be happy to," Jake replied. "And maybe you could show me some of those mathematical proofs that computers can't crack." "I suspect there's a lot we could learn from each other." Emperor Vexhaller stepped forward. "Then it is settled. Commander Matthews, you will remain here as our guest while arrangements are made for thee.